Hey everyone, it's Canadian Libertarian, and I am answering the call. For those of you out there who've been asking me to start doing interviews, start hammering out these kind of ideas with other people rather than just offering my own commentary, well, I figured what better way than to start this new approach, this new endeavor, this new venture of doing interviews and coming together with other fellow Canadian liberty-loving individuals than with my own son, Matt Hunter. He also has his own YouTube channel called the Anarchist Podcast. He hasn't made any videos recently because he's been hard at work, but he too cares tremendously about standing up and fighting for individual liberty for all Canadians. Now, some of you out there will probably remember that actually we had an interview together. Well, I guess it's been a little over, well, more than a year. It was while Donald Trump was running to become the president of the United States. And during that conversation, I took the purist approach. You know, I tried to remain completely steadfast in the libertarian principle, in the libertarian approach. What my son did is he took the pragmatic approach. He took the pragmatic side of the conversation, and it was the result and a consequence of that conversation that actually kind of helped me in some ways, in some regards, to kind of understand that, you know what? It is true. You could be a purist, you know, and be standing on the sidelines, you know, preaching from the pulpit or, you know, telling everyone how good you should be and how ethical you should be, how moral you should be, and how using politics, how using government as a means to affect change. Now, that's not the proper approach. And there's still part of me in my core, I believe that culture is what drives politics. Politics is downstream of culture. So you do need to lay the foundation first, but at the same time, I also recognize that if your opponents, if those of you who are trying to impose their will, their mandates, their edicts on you, are using the political process against you, well, if you avoid, you know, if they're using the big giant gun in the room against you, if you avoid trying to use the gun by being a purist, well, what's the ultimate consequence of that? Well, you end up being one dead. Yeah, you might have been smart, you might have been wise, you might have been purist, but you're dead ultimately. So what benefit were you really? You know, what kind of change did you truly affect? You know, in that moment, in that perilous moment of danger, no, the best thing to do is, if you see a gun pointed at you, unfortunately, you're going to have to pick that gun up, and hopefully you beat them to the punch and you pull the trigger first. Not saying we want to use violence. You know, I know that's a little bit of a strange analogy, but ultimately, that's what we're really talking about here. You have to fight fire with fire. Matt, what do you think?
Yeah, absolutely. So I understood at a fairly early time on in the presidency that the left, like you said, uses the political realm to inflict their values on us. And I understood, like I can explain it to you an analogy, that if you had two sides going to war and both of them had weaponry, even weaponry, let's say it's guns and rifles and whatever that, but you had the left who also had chemical weapons, and you had the right who were the purists and who just said that, hey, it's immoral to use chemical weapons, we're not going to use them. But you got the people on the left who don't care about morals or ethics, and they use them against us. They obviously have more firepower. The chemical weapons gives them the added advantage, and they will win the war. So the left are willing to put all options on the table, and we need to do that. And I realized at an early time on that the libertarians were kind of divided with the conservatives, and it split us up because we had the purists that were like, let's not use government, it's immoral. Let's go and fight for a voluntary society, which I still believe in all the principles behind that. But the left is very united. That's one good thing I'll give them. They're united around communism, socialism, bigger government, where you got the right, who you have the purists, and then the neocon conservatives, and we're divided. And that hurts us, that divided. We need to be together. So another analogy is the enemy of my enemy is my friend. So do I agree with the neocon conservatives? Absolutely not. But I will use them as a tool to push my agenda, which is getting towards more individual liberty and freedom. So Trump, I definitely don't agree with everything. He's obviously not a principled anarchist. His philosophy, you know, he isn't espousing for a libertarian society tomorrow, but he's pushing the narrative towards my values. Whereas if we let the left win and stuff like that, and you had Hillary in right now, well, we'd be in a lot worse state than we are. You wouldn't have got the tax cuts, which literally put money in people's pockets that could have been spent towards pushing the agenda of freedom. You would have got more mass immigration with Hillary, which would have brought in more people to vote for the left and continue that narrative and continue presidencies down the road that might be Democratic and not conservative. So I understood at a very early age that we had to use the political system in order to accomplish our goal, which is getting more individual freedom and liberty.
Right. So really, totally, I understand and I agree with that. You know, we've all grown. I think we all grow. And this is the beautiful thing about having these conversations. Ultimately, it's about using every tool in our arsenal at our disposal to fight against the people that, like he just suggested, and I mean, it's just the reality, folks. They're willing to use every means available to them to impose their edicts, their mandates, their will on you. So yes, if you're unwilling to, you know, pick up from where they left off and assume those roles of responsibility of using those very same tools against them, then ultimately, like I said, you will be the one, you will ultimately, you know, maybe in the long run, you know, in the long run game, you know, the purest idea might manifest itself maybe hundreds of years in the future. But we have to care about ourselves, the people that live in the world today, you know, the people that have to deal and function day in and day out, week, month, year after year, with these kind of ever-encroaching, oppressive regimes that are constantly turning us away from being, you know, autonomous individuals with proper roles and responsibilities to just mindless collectivists that are serf subjects and slaves to some pretense of having a central planning ruling class. Now, I've never wanted to ever, not myself, not for my children, not for anyone. I don't even care if you're a stranger. I'm a live, let live kind of guy. I have certain ways I live my life, and I think the best thing that we can all do, ultimately, is lead by example. But yes, never, ever, ever deny any capacity that you have to push back against the people that want to oppress you.
So one thing I want to touch on is where I found my defining moment was where I switched from purist mindset to the pragmatist and started getting on the Trump bandwagon. And I can literally pinpoint the moment I had that switch in my brain, and it was around the whole idea of immigration. Now, libertarians espouse that, you know, forget borders, let people travel freely. And that was a big divide for me because I understood that that's a good concept, but when you have a welfare system in place and you have open borders, you're going to have people coming from, you know, these other countries that don't do so well, and they're going to come in here and seep off the system and take advantage of our kindness and generosity over here with the welfare programs that we espouse. And a lot of people that come over here and take advantage of these welfare programs when you have an open border society like that with a welfare system, they tend to vote for what? More welfare programs and a bigger government. So that was contradicted. So when the libertarians were espousing open borders, and then you had people that were semi-libertarians who were like, well, wait a minute, we can't have open borders when we have a welfare system. This just isn't going to work for us. We're going to be people are going to be brought in mass numbers. We're going to be outpopulated, and obviously their governments are going to rule because, sadly, the majority rules is what we fall under in the society that we live for today. So that was my defining moment of when I started getting behind Trump, was the immigration call for sure. So I'd now pass it off to you. Where do you find your moment was when you went from the purist mindset and started to support Trump?
Well, you know what? It's funny that he's mentioned this because, to be honest, the immigration thing was actually one of the defining moments for me as well, because I too, and I've listened to it. I'm friends with Larkin Rose. You know, I'm friends with Victor Prost. They had their own debate. And I've listened to many other people from, like I say, whether they were philosophical in nature, political in nature, or just using historical precedent as a means for their conversation or what they had to espouse. But in reality, if you think about it, anybody should be able to accept the reality that, yes, open borders, once again, that's an ideal. You know, that's an ideal. We should all love and respect and promote an ideal. But ultimately, that ideal is not anything that we can ever, we're not going to get to that ideal. And like he's suggesting, when you have a welfare state, and it's not that I'm a blind nationalist. Listen, this is something I want to point out right now too, is just blind nationalism suggests that you should sacrifice yourself for like a nation, let's say. Well, you know what? Inside of that nation, there are some really bad people. So it's not just blind nationalism for the sake of being a nationalist. No, but we live in a country. There's current structures that have already been set up. There is a welfare state. We would love to eliminate that. We would all love to have just private borders where we can all hold each other to account properly, but that's not the paradigm we live under. The paradigm we live under is, yes, there are currently hundreds of thousands of people pouring across our borders, while in Canada, 300,000 plus a year. That's just the legal immigrants. Then you have the asylum seekers, 40,000 Syrians. Then you got Haitians, you got people from Northern Africa, Libya. You got, like I say, Trudeau now and them dipshits, 3 years. In 2020, they want to bring in another million immigrants. And like I say, that's just through the legal venues. Think about in a population in a country that's only 36 million. When you bring an additional million people into a country that's only 36 million, and I've heard people, some dipshits on the left, some of these idiots, or even some, like I'll even admit some of these fucking more purist libertarians. Oh, well, we're a big country. It doesn't matter the size of the geography. It has to do with the economy. It's all about scale in regards to economy, people. And when you have a welfare state, you can't keep expanding the amount of people that are going to be on the dole. And we know, all the studies are out there. Just look out there. What is it, 60? I think CBC themselves reported, and I'll post a link to it in the description of this video below. I think it's 60% of the migrants that are coming to this country are either economic or living off the doles. And even when people say, oh, well, it's all about jobs. Okay, well, how many Canadians out there would love to not just have gainful employment, but be able to maybe, have a little bit of a conversation with your boss and maybe be able to get a raise sometime, not just live off of minimum wages, but actually be able to challenge your boss for a raise. But how are you going to be able to do that when there's just a never-ending influx of people that come from foreign countries that maybe work for 1/10 of what you're used to, what you've become accustomed to? So they'll offer their services for much, much, much cheaper. Well, that would be fine if we all started from the same base platform, but we're not. We live in Western developed countries. We can't race down to that lowest common denominator, or if we ever tried, well, then once again, what benefit is it going to be if we all just race down to be who could be the best slave, be the best subject, the best served? Now, I don't want to have anything to do. I don't want to participate in that race to the bottom. So yes, when it comes to the immigration, that was actually one of the defining moments for me as well, is because, listen, yeah, ideally, everything should be about private property. I still don't believe, whether it's the federal government, provincial governments, local jurisdictions, or First Nations, I don't believe in this bullshit pretense that these people own the entire continent or country of Canada or the U.S. No. Ultimately, it's about private properties. That's what matters to me the most. But like I say, that's not the world we live in. I could make an argument if we were living in that world. I could align with Lark and Rose, and as much as I agree with them on so many other things, I could agree with them if we lived in this utopian libertarian world. We don't. So let's function, let's respond, let's react to the world that we actually genuinely live in. And that's why Trump, and with the border and, ending all these sanctuary cities. I mean, just think about the simple fact that there are basically all kinds of areas in the United States where, what's a sanctuary city? You're basically given, I don't know, some kind of sense of morality to people that broke the rules and are using, corrupt politicians and these central planners, these collectivists, to plunder the hard-working productivity and labor of the people that have established, a beneficial system that was meant to help each other. It was all about the social contract, right? We were all about, just like as a family, and a perfect example in my own family. I'm more than willing to sacrifice myself in some capacity, in some means, in some way for my family. But ultimately, it has to be determined by me. I sacrifice for those that I care about and those I deem worthy of it. But the minute you put this pretense like Trudeau or anyone, oh, come on in. Well, no, Trudeau. That was never part of the contract. Nobody ever signed up the fact that, yeah, you can just keep plundering my wealth. And at this point, actually, if you think about the levels of debts and deficits in Canada, which, yeah, we're number one. Yay, fucking bravo, right? It's actually not even me. It's not even my kid. It might be his grandkids, his kids or his grandkids that are ultimately going to be forced to pay for this shit. Although, like I say, if they're wise, no one will pay these fucking bills, right? And then the economy, then some of these bond buyers, some of these people will realize that, yeah, you're buying up a lot of worthless fucking paper, people, because we're not going to be paying off your goddamn debts and deficits. But that's what they're basically trying to do at this point, is impose not just, you know, social slavery, but economic slavery on people that don't even have a voice.
Yeah. Yeah, and we have our own things to deal with in Canada. You know, another analogy, if you had a home and you couldn't afford to feed your children and they were starving, you wouldn't go down to the local homeless shelter and bring a bunch more people to live with you when you can't even get your own house in order. So, you know, our infrastructure just can't take the massive influx of these people to take using our infrastructure, using our hospitals, using our schools and all that kind of stuff. And then that takes resources from the natural population. And it all comes down to fairness. You know, Canadians have worked years and years paying taxes into the system, and then you got someone who comes over and has never sunk a dime into the country, and they get the same amount of benefits out of the system. It's just not fair. And that's what it boils down to. It has nothing to do with race and, you know, oh, you're racist because you don't want to bring in migrants. Absolutely not. I do think there's a benefit to bringing in migrants, but you also got to wonder, you know, are they coming to contribute? So let's bring people over here that are worked, that are educated. You can't just open up the borders and let people come in, like you said, and sip off welfare, or take jobs from the people here in Canada that need it.
Exactly. Well, this is the thing that I've always had the problem with it, especially for, like, they constantly talk about, you know, having to help all these people. And I mean, I'm a compassionate person. Don't get me wrong. And if you look through my history, whether it's my social media as far as Facebook or Twitter or the YouTube videos or everything, I care. I'm a compassionate person. I care about the fucking Syrian people. I care about some of these North African migrants or some of these people that, you know, have had to suffer needlessly. I don't put the blame on these people. But my problem predominantly is the fact that, like I say, there's a finite amount of resources currently in existence. And it's not like, it'd be a different story if, perfect example, look at the debts and deficits. Ontario, for one, and Quebec, which are two of the provinces that are bringing in a lot of these illegal or even legal migrants. Both of them are, well, I mean, Ontario's the province with the largest sub-sovereign debt in the entire world. There's entire countries that aren't as indebted as just one province in Canada, Ontario. And just to give you an idea how indebted this province is, California, which is a state that has a population the size of the entire country of Canada, their debt levels are half of just one province in this country. So, like I say, it'd be like Matt was suggesting. If if Canadians, we were just so rich, so well off, you know, we had, you know, trillions of dollars stashed in our bank accounts and all this positive growth and economic, well, you know, we might be able to spread that stuff around. But once again, even then, it should be how we choose to divvy it up, right? If we're the one that are producing the wealth, we should be the ones ultimately get to decide how it's distributed. Not some central planner, but we're not. There is no, and this pretense of economic growth, oh, if you bring in, you know, these immigrants so they can create jobs. Are you suggesting, this is the thing I want to ask some of you people out there, you leftists. Are you really suggesting that the domestic population, which, I mean, I'll admit the education system has been a failure to a certain degree, but take an average Canadian, pit them up against a North African or a Libyan or a Syrian. Are you telling me that you believe that Canadians are so incompetent that you need to bring these people here to create jobs? Are you really naive enough to believe that the Canadian population, the people, no, what it is, it's all about incentives. It's all about incentives. Oh, there's all kinds of pent up economic activity just waiting to be unleashed. The problem is we're not being paid properly. And because of, I won't really delve into the economics of it, but through inflation, every time Canadians over the last, well, as long as I've been alive, for 4.5 decades plus, every time you genuinely increase some amount of prosperity through productivity, through all these technologies, the government, they find ways to devalue all that you've built up. So you've built up all these nest eggs, but the government constantly keeps taking it away and away. It's all about incentive. There's all kinds of, I mean, think about it. Just, instead of unemployment figures, this is what you hear a lot today. Oh, unemployment rates are low. Okay, go look at what the labor participation rate is. There's literally, in Canada, you're looking at roughly around 35% of the adult population that's not being productive in any way. Are you saying that they're all just incompetent? And they're just too entitled that they won't take on these jobs. No, they'll take on these jobs, but they aren't going to do it for what someone that came from North Africa that's used to $1 a day. You know, they might work for $5-6 an hour, or well, under the table, because in Canada you got to have the minimum wage, right? But Canadians would work to assume and take those tasks and those roles and responsibilities if you would pay them properly. Because like I say, you're trying to compare apples to orange when you talk about economics as far as Canadians, Americans, the British people, or people from some of these third world countries. Stop trying to compare these people. Canadians will be able to take care of themselves, and you'll see, just, hey, let market fundamentals take place instead of central planning, and you'll see that, holy shit. You want to talk about economic growth? Like I said, there's a lot of pent-up demand that will be unleashed. If you did anything, which is going to make me pivot back to Trump, do what Trump's doing down south. Reduce people's tax burden. Reduce people's, especially for people that want to be entrepreneurs or business owners. Reduce the regulation. All these just soul-destroying measures that, I mean, even myself, there's many different ventures I would love to undertake. I won't. And the reason for that is, they constantly make it, every time you want to, you get up that mountain, they just make it steeper or put barriers continually so it seems so insurmountable that you don't even want to undertake them. No, let the market, and when I say market, there's another thing. If any of you that are watching this video don't understand economics, all market means is just people. That's all, people. When people are talking about free markets, just free people. Let freedom flourish, and you'll see that you'll not just have social endeavors that'll be much more prosperous, but economic endeavors. Well, you'll see the Canadian economy will grow, and there will be prosperity for everybody if you just allow market fundamentals and stop chaining them. Take a shackle or two off them and watch how much quicker they'll run.
Yeah. And if the left truly, truly cared about helping migrant families and helping these people from these war-torn countries, I find it very funny that the cost to resettle a migrant in a country similar to theirs in the Middle East, surrounding countries, you could do like 10 or 12 families. I don't remember the exact statistic, but it's like 10 or 12 families you could resettle in the Middle East in a neighboring country per one to bring all the way over to Canada in our high cost of living society over here. So if you truly cared about the refugees on the left, why not send a bunch of them to Sudan or and all these other places surrounding in the Middle East, where at least they're in their own cultures, so they're similar to their lifestyles, and you can resettle a lot more of them, helping a lot more families and children and women, all the people that you like to care about on the left. You could save a lot more people by doing it that way. So the fact that you want to bring them into Canada, bring that one family instead of saving 10 families, resettling them in the Middle East, shows me it's strictly to do with you want to bring in more votership for you. That's what it is. Because it makes no financial sense. You're actually hurting the people by not just settling them in the Middle East where you could do a lot more families with that money. So it just proved to me the left just wants to bring in as much voter class as they can because they know they're losing. They know they can't cling to power much longer. The gig is up, so they got to bring in these low-income migrants and people over there that'll vote for bigger government and vote for the left.
Yeah, actually talking about that, I remember a guy, I can't remember who it was, he basically showed a big jar of gumballs. Basically a representation of all the potential migrants around the world in some of these third world or emerging countries, to the tune of hundreds of millions, folks. So no matter what, all the compassion in the world, there's nothing we can do. We can't help everyone to bring them here. But what we can do, like Matt's suggesting, is exactly, listen, we live in, there's a big globe. It's not just North America, right? So if you want prosperity, if you really care about these people having some prosperity in their own country, think about it. If you're from these countries, think about the brain drain that's happening in these countries. If all the good people, all the ambitious people, all the people that, as some of the left suggests, they just want to come here and work. Well, if they're ambitious, don't you think you would want to put that productivity in their country? Because, like I said, we can't bring them all here. You can't just, there's 7 billion people, and what they say by 2050, we might have 9 billion people. You can't bring them all to North America. You can't all bring them into your household, right? No, the best thing you do, just like if you were raising your kids, do you raise your kids to be autonomous and personally responsible, or do you want them to live with you for the rest of your life? No. The best thing you could do, like I say, and it's all scalable. In your personal life, it's no different than the whole pretense of government, like, and the social contract. The concept is the same. It's just scalable on a much larger level. But how you teach people to be prosperous, self-sustainable, and beneficial to each other is to be self-reliant. Bringing them to our countries, we don't really need them. Like, we're far enough developed now in Western societies. Yeah, we don't need that, and which is why the propaganda, like Matt's saying, it's not about compassion at all. The left don't give a shit about, for the most part. Some do. Hey, that's a blanket statement. There are some people that just genuinely care, but for the most part, the ones that are political in nature, it's not about compassion. No, it's about either getting a tax base, or think about it. If you work for the government, think about in Canada. If you have a population that's becoming more self-reliant and less reliant on government, well, who does that help and who does that hurt? Well, it sure shit doesn't help people that work for government, right? It's like if you have a population just like you as a parent. What happens if you're a good, successful parent is you end up with an empty nest where there's nobody dependent on you. You might be lonely. You might want to wish they come back, but the worst thing you do, what are you going to do? Make it so they don't have any jobs so they have to run back to you? No. The best thing you can do is to teach people to be self-reliant and self-sufficient. So this constant change of the culture, while we're trying to, in Western society, teach people to be self-reliant, self-sufficient, and less dependent on government, the leftists are constantly trying to reverse course. So they're just trying to create a dependent class. And like Matt suggested as well, think about who that benefits. It's not just the bureaucrats. It's not just the deep state. It's not just all the frontline workers in government that rely on that forced wealth or income redistribution. Because if your services are truly needed, like if you're a doctor or nurse, trust me, you got a job no matter what. You don't have to work for government. People need your services. It's always going to be required. But there's a lot of bureaucracy in this country that would completely cease to exist, and a lot of our wealth wouldn't be redistributed and stolen and plundered for these resources if it wasn't for the fact that they constantly look at means and measures to keep them somehow viable. Like I said, if you knew how much of our economy was completely squandered, just wasteful, it's just like that Keynesian mentality, right? Oh, let's go break a bunch of windows, and then, oh, look how good we are, because look, we've created jobs. Well, yeah, but the difference that they won't tell you is the windows are already good. You could have used the $10,000 to fix those windows. Well, you could have used it elsewhere in the economy, right? So screw Keynesianism. Yeah, sure, we're all dead in the long run eventually, but you know what? We have to live before we die too.
Well, here's another thing I find very frustrating about the people on the left and those that don't understand economics. And I'd point this question to anyone watching this video. Is the poorest person in rich nations doing better than the poorest person in poor nations? It's obviously the answer is yes. So prosperity, wealth creation, capitalism is the fastest way to turn people out of poverty. Look at North Korea and South Korea. What's the difference? One's a dictatorship and one's got some semi-capitalism. So the poor people in South Korea are doing a lot better than the poor people in North Korea. So the fastest way to help the poor is by doing tax cuts, lowering regulations and all this stuff, stirring the economy, stimulating it, creating more jobs and more wealth, and that more wealth and more jobs will create innovation, will, like I said, create more jobs, and that in itself will take care of the poor. So it's so contradictory that the left just wants to bring in these people and stifle capitalism and innovation, raise taxes and all that stuff, which is stumping out jobs, which is actually hurting the poor. So if you really on the left want to help the poor, let the change go on the American economy. Get rid of all this bullcrap regulation, which is Trump is doing. Allow businesses to thrive. Allow tax cuts so people want to bring their businesses in the United States. And like I said, the richest countries, the poor do very well in those countries compared to the nations that are under communist-type rule and are very poor. So that's how you help the poor, by helping people make money and helping companies. People don't like to hear it, but helping the rich actually helps the poor, believe it or not.
Yeah, exactly. Well, the thing that I think about when he's talking about this stuff too is, and we've heard this all reported before, there's trillions of dollars stashed in offshore accounts all around the world. Now, the reason why you're not seeing inflation as high as it naturally or normally would be is because those companies, those people, those 0.1%, they're not spending that money because to them, there doesn't seem to be anywhere that's worthwhile investing no more because everything is centrally planned. So there's all kinds, like I said, there's all kinds of pent-up demand. There's all kinds of wealth that's just waiting to be unleashed. And we see in the U.S., well, look at what happened with Trump as soon as he started with it. And this was just a matter of going from, what, it was 35% down to 21%?
Yep.
I mean, that's a, it's a substantial change, don't get me wrong, but it's not, it could go even lower. But just from that roughly 15% decrease, you got what? Apple bringing back what? Hundreds of billions of dollars. Hundreds of billions.
$350 billion.
Back they're willing to pay like billions of dollars in taxes, which will go into the U.S. economy, and they're stimulating jobs. They're creating, I think, 20,000 additional jobs, and this is just one company. But of course, I mean, think about this. Let's take politics off the equation. If I said to you, I'm willing to steal less from you, right? Hello, of course, the person is basically willing to say, yeah, well, if you're not going to steal as much from me, then I'll return the favor in kind, and I'll reciprocate by saying, hey, you're showing me that you're going to be a little bit more reasonable. So, hey, it's just like with your family, a spouse, your kids, maybe your neighbor. If you give a little, you'll get some back. But the leftist, the authoritarian approach is all about, oh no, we want to steal more and more. Well, all you're doing is disincentivize. That's like you destroy natural incentives the minute you try to hold the gun to someone's head. It's like back in the day in slavery, right? Slavery didn't necessarily even have to exist just by rule of authority of government. It's just the simple fact that it wasn't productive in any way, because if you have to hire, maybe 10 or 20 or 30 people to look over a field of 100 slave owners because they're constantly running away, well, no. The best thing you do is just pay them. Don't treat them as slaves. Treat them properly, and all of a sudden they'll actually want to work for you, because like I say, it's all about the psychology. It's all about incentive, and this has been known for hundreds of years. If you live, and we live in post-Enlightenment era. Anyone that lives in the modern information age like we do today, if you don't understand the fundamentals of economics, supply and demand. Like I say, I'm not talking about getting into macroeconomics, just pure basic fundamentals of, incentive. And you can translate that in every aspect of your life. If you took the time, you could think about it yourself. What drives you? What incentivizes you? And you would come to the same understanding. So whether it's social, economical, or political in nature, it's all about having the right incentive. And Trump is saying, I'm going to give the people the right incentive. And think about every country in the world. Now, you can go too far, but every country in the world that's ever been truly, genuinely prosperous has had the psychology, the philosophy of that country was about embolden the people. You're good. We respect you for your individuality. We respect you for your hard work, for your ethics, for your morality. And when you do that, well, look, like I say, Western society was built on that. Whether it was the Germans, now they went too far, don't get me wrong, but that was when they went collectivist, right? But if you give your population a good, healthy psychology, a good, healthy dose of self-confidence, right? And being ambitious and rewarding them for their merits, for their habits, for their behaviors, when they're positive, when they're doing something productive, like I say, whether it's a community, whether it's your country, whether it's a province, or whether it's your family, it has always proven to be beneficial. Reward good behavior, reward, proper economic activities, reward people who are willing to, keep the lights on, do all the things that need to be done, but you got to disincentivize. You've got to go against bad behaviors. And look what has happened. Look what has happened as a result of the economic crash. Now, Trump's trying to fight against that. But after that, basically they said, we're going to bail out the banks. We're going to bail out all these corrupt institutions because, we don't want to rock the boat. In reality, that was the ideal time to correct behavior. But they wanted to paint over, they wanted to mask over it, and now we're seeing the consequence. Well, instead of having a few banks that were too big to fail, now we have even more. And now they're even more entrenched and even more along the lines of too big to fail. Like I said, at some point in time, there's going to have to be corrective behavior. Trump, instead of doing, up into the apple cart, I think his approach is actually smart. Maybe it's not a good idea to up into the apple cart completely, right? Because then you might end up with civil conflict, civil strife. That stuff can go down a really, really dangerous route. But at least start trying to pivot people in the right direction. And that's what ultimately the policy decision that Trump's been making is basically about, you're going to have to start learning to take care of yourself, folks. You're going to have to start doing things a little bit more proper. Let's use some proper incentive. And as you're seeing, it's working. It's working. Whereas in Canada, Yeah, we're going the complete wrong direction.
Well, a video I'd encourage anyone to check out. I love it, and I chuckled when I watched it. I think it's with CNN, and it's Bernie Sanders, and the reporter's asking Bernie Sanders, how do you feel now that since the tax cuts and everything and the regulation and corporate tax rates have been cut down, that businesses are now giving people bonuses because they have that extra income, and it's putting more money in the workers' pockets. Well, Bernie in the interview he goes, I think we're having technical problems, and the interview just shuts up. Like, he can't even answer that because always the argument the left says, well, if you cut taxes and these evil corporations are making more money, they're just going to hoard it to themselves and they're not going to give it to the worker. Now, in certain circumstances, that may be the case. But that's when we need to use social ostracism. So if you have a business who's paying their companies terrible and paying crappy wages, then do what we do today. We protest. Don't go to that company and buy their product. That's going to be more effective. But you free that, you cut that company's taxes and regulations, making that company have more money. Greedy capitalists want to make more money. So what are they going to do? They're going to use that money to invest back into their company to make more money and make more profits, which usually results in hiring more people, expanding their business. And hiring more people creates more jobs, putting more money into people's pockets, employing more people. So, sorry, Bernie, it looks like you're wrong. And it looks like the old tax cuts are putting a lot more money back into the middle class's pockets. We're seeing that now, that these greedy corporations aren't just keeping it all to themselves, they're actually giving it to their workers. And anyone who runs a business and any kind of business mindset, you understand a happy employee makes a happy company. You got to treat your employees good or they're not going to be productive. You pay your employees crap, you treat them like crap, well, they're not going to come into work at 9 to 5 and put in a really good day for you and make the most profits you possibly can. But you treat your employee good, you pay them well, you feel like they're doing something for your company and there's respect and honor in your relationship, you're both going to be productive and you're both going to do well. So I'd encourage anyone to check that interview out with Bernie. Yeah. Completely shut down, and he's just like, sorry, technical malfunction. He didn't even have a response.
Exactly. Well, I mean, that goes completely in line with the merit-based approach with anything. Like I said, it's all skill, but it just comes down to merit. So think about it. I've seen myself, and I've known people in my life that have had to work in these environments, whether it's unionized or these minimum wages. If you've ever been anywhere, and I'm sure you have, I mean, come on, we all live in the real world here, right? So we've all seen people, and we know people that work in these minimum wage environments, these collectivist environments. Does everyone have the exact same work ethic? Not even close. You will notice, and studies have basically shown about 10% of the workforce, you know, if you have 100 people, 10 people are making up about half of the productivity in the company. But yet, everybody's paid the same. Think about what that does to the incentive. Once again, the hard-working person that's doing, you know, a large substantial amount of that work, watching the other person that's getting paid the exact same amount of money that's only putting maybe 60, 70% of the effort in, does that seem fair? No, it's all about incentive. Okay, I think we're going to switch things up a little bit. We've hammered out and discussed some pretty important topics as far as I'm concerned. But as we all know today is the day after the great FISA memo release, you know, and the Democrats are all chomping at the bit and all nervous. Oh, no, I guess because it's going to destroy their dominant narrative, that kind of propaganda they're trying to put out there. You know, it's all about, oh, we're supposed to be scared of the Russians. Now, I'm not quite as well versed or knowledgeable in this particular topic, but Matt seems to know quite a bit about what this all entails. And I'm sure you've already heard today all about this release of the memo. So this seems like appropriate time to segue into discussing that particular revelation.
So I've read the memo, and I'll basically just summarize it up for you guys. Basically, I'll explain it in an analogy. So let's say that my father was running for office, and I didn't like him, and I didn't want him to win as a president. And what I did was I made up a fake story saying that he's a white supremacist, Russian, he's colluding with the Russians, and all these other terrible things that they're saying about Trump. And I went to the court, and I presented that as evidence. And I said, listen, he's a white supremacist, he's a Russian agent, and we got to investigate, we got to spy on him, and we got to tap his phones and everything and figure out what's going on here. And my evidence, because in a court of law, you need evidence to back up your claims. And their evidence that they relied on was this wrote-up fake dossier that was paid for by the DNC, and also an article written by someone who was a Democratic supporter, and that was their evidence that they gave for the reason to spy on Trump. No, there was no evidence in that. It was just someone wrote up this fake dossier, which is what we're finding out now. And the implications of that is you have a sitting president, Obama, and his intelligence agencies, the DOJ, the FBI, and these people, these agents, going in a secret court and getting a warrant to spy on, at that time, he was a president-elect, he was going to be the president, but not yet, so he's an American citizen. So he's an American citizen just like any other American citizen. So that shows us, in order to get a warrant to spy on anyone in America, they can just make up some dossier, or make up some claims, and some fake article they can reference as the point of evidence, and that's how they get the clear to actually spy on Trump. Now, what I and what everyone else is liken this to is this is a political coup. You have a sitting president, intelligence agencies all colluding to make sure that Hillary Clinton gets in office and Trump does not. And you also had all these similar people that were in charge of writing this memo and investigating Trump and the Russian stuff, who also investigated Hillary. And we see how that worked out. She got off scot-free. Meanwhile, she leaked tons of classified information, and she gets not even go to jail, no trouble or nothing like that. But Trump is getting investigated like crazy under the microscope over these fake claims of him being tied to Russia. So to boil it up, you had Obama and the DOJ and the people in power didn't want Trump in power. They wanted Hillary to win. We now see that, and that's a bias in the presidential election. And it was basically a coup to make sure that their person got in power and Trump didn't. And the ramifications of that is very damaging. If people don't go to jail for this, if heads don't turn, basically what that says to the American population and to the world abroad is that it's the power, the elites in power and the higher-ups that can dictate who gets to become the president. And we've always kind of knew this, but it's nice now that it's open in the public, that nobody can debate it now. But we like to profess that we are in a democracy, a republic, and this is attacking the foundation of our country. So if they can just throw in a puppet to control the country because they make up some fake claims, well, everything goes out the door. There's no republic anymore. There's no freedoms. There's nothing. So this is literally one of the most important things I think that we could ever discuss in this age, because this is showing that we had an elected, a sitting president, along with his intelligence agencies, doing a political coup to make sure that their person gets in power and Trump doesn't. And that's very damaging, the effects of that.
It's a classic example of what's been termed, deep state, the bureaucracy, the swamp, basically unelected officials that are just basically part of the established system. And we have that in Canada in spades, believe me. But it's basically, you think you're changing things when you elect a new Democrat, Republic, or Canada, Liberals or Conservatives or NDP. But ultimately, what most people forget is there's a whole entrenched bureaucracy of people that work for the government and have a lot of positions of power and authority and can affect things dramatically that have, you can't hold them truly to account, because these are not elected officials, right? And basically what we've learned, Edward Snowden revelations, right there was a clear and concise proof example of just how easy it is to go to these, and it's a secret court. This FISA court has been shown, I forget the exact numbers, but I believe it's about 97% of the requests were basically just rubber stamped. Hey, you want to do whatever you want to do? Hey, it's all secret, right? It's all flying on the radar. The American people have no idea what the hell's going on anyway. So here, stamp, 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 stamp. Do as you wish, do as you might. So that's, once again, that's a clear example of this deep state, the bureaucracy, the swamp. That's why it is so important. To me, actually, that's one of the most important things. As far as, even if you go back to the days of the kings, because the perception of the people placed all their authority in a king. I actually have turned it, if I had a choice of a monarchy or a democracy, I'll take a monarchy every day. Because, or even a dictatorship. You know why? Because as soon as you lob the head off the dictator, well, the rest of the snake scurries off into the grass or just fucking dies on its own, right? Because it doesn't have the lifeblood to sustain itself. It doesn't have the sense of direction anymore. But when you have a deep state, when you have a bureaucracy, well, no, that's entrenched so deeply. And so many people benefit economically and socially as a result of that. Trying to unwind it, that is actually, but see, Trump, this is another thing. This is what I love about how this is being done. This is how I know that when you fucking idiots, these leftists that talk about Trump, he's an idiot. Oh yeah? Changing up the judiciary. Hello. That is actually, that's fucking genius, because that's how you actually truly change things up is, because Think about it. They've written laws, they've interpreted laws that are so, I mean, look at it. You look out there nowadays, it doesn't matter the laws on the book, they can interpret a law to mean whatever the hell they want it to be. That's why you have to have judges. That's why you have to have, if you're going to have a political system, if you're going to have a judiciary, right? Like I say, the three branches of government, executive, judiciary, and the legislature. Well, you have to have people in there that know fundamentally what the whole point of the Constitution, right? That's why Gorsuch, or whatever his name was, the Supreme Court appointee, was about, he actually understands and he wants to be someone that is an originalist when it comes to understanding, defining the meanings of what the Constitution entails, right? So nowadays, they've taken what was basically a beautifully written document that set out with clear and concise language, and it should have been easily interpreted, and it was early on, that there's a very, very, very limited role for the federal government. But when you get lawyers, when you get bureaucrats, when you get, like I say, snake oil salesmen and political pundits, they have twisted it to the point where, well, look at the U.S., look at Canada, look at UK, look at a lot of Western developed countries, is they have used the deep state, they have used bureaucracy, and the fact that they all rely on that bureaucracy to maintain their position. So it's so entrenched, and the only way you can unwind that is to literally start changing the psychology, and how that, you have to start that out as, you know, leading by example. And you have to have people like Neil Gorsuch, you have to have people saying, no, the role for government is limited and it's restricted to this small portion of what it means to have social and economic development in this country. So the fact that Trump is unwinding the deep state, well, it's you look at what they're doing. Look at the result. Look at the way they're thrashing about. And what it is because the leftists realize that, no, it's not about, it was never about changing figureheads. Bush, Clinton, whatever. Who fucking cares about the fucking figurehead at the top? Ultimately, no, it's all about changing things from the ground up, from the foundation, from, like I say, removing all those obstacles, all those barriers to freedom, all that bureaucracy, unwind it. Genius, once again, genius fucking move, but yet people want to say that Trump's an idiot. I don't care if you want to give Trump all the credit or even people around him. What they're doing makes complete sense, and this is something that has to happen in Canada.
Yep. Well, Trump is, I find, a genius mastermind, because he also, a couple months before all this FISA stuff came out, if you remember correctly, he declassified all the JFK files. And there was a very hidden motive behind doing that. What the JFK files, when they declassified, showed us is that when you get a president in office who starts bucking the system, who starts speaking out against the deep state, what happened to Kennedy? He got a bullet through the head right on live TV to send a message to everyone that if you don't follow the tow line, we will kill you. And I think Trump on purposely declassified that to send a message to the American people that, see, our government in history before has shot and killed our president because he didn't toe the line. So now he's trying to save himself so that that doesn't happen to him, because, you know, like I said, the last time we had a president in office that started speaking truth, well, it didn't end well for him. And then you got Trump here with all this stuff now. So it's a very, very hostile situation, and I'm really anxious to see the outcome of this FISA memo, because if people don't go to jail for this, this is going to be a huge, huge, huge problem. The American Revolution, how America got funded, they went to war with the British because they felt that they weren't being represented. It was corrupt. It was a monarch. Their values weren't representing. So they left. They fought. They died because they didn't feel represented. Well, if we find out that Obama can bring in some fake dossier and get a warrant to spy on the president and openly collude with the intelligence agencies to try to get Hillary in and stifle Trump getting in, basically a coup, we're back at square one. And we're back at the deep states controlling the narrative, and we're not feeling represented. And then that starts towing the line of civil revolution. And this is also why you see the left stirring up Antifa, because they know it might move to this point where we actually end up in a civil war, so they're getting their foot soldiers ready. And we don't want to go down that way. That's why we need to all pour our support into Trump, because we don't want to go down the violent route. We may win. We got the guns. That's the one thing about the right. We got all the guns. We got all the manly man and the strength. We might win the civil war, but at what cost? A lot of people will die. A lot of bloodshed. A lot of bad things will happen. So while we can fight peacefully, we have to. And I'm really anxious. Trump, please, you better make some heads roll. You better arrest some people. People better get indicted. People better go to jail. Or this will send a message to the American people that you're no longer represented anymore. And like I said, the last time in history, American people felt that they weren't being represented by their government and their hands were tied in this republic. It led to a civil war. So Trump, I hope you make the right decision.
Right on, Matt. I think now it seems like a good time because yeah, we've been doing lots of the positive aspects of Trump, and there are many to be touted for sure, for certain. But I asked you, just to kind of flip things upside down right now, is are there any policies that you perceive of Trump, so that we can let people out there know it's like, yeah, obviously, I would never want to be, nor would Matt or anyone, nor would I ever, we're not dogmatists. We're not all about the man, right? Like you can never place your full faith in just one man. He's just a human being and he's fallible like the rest of us. So I'm sure there are probably areas that we have to, I mean, if we're principled, right, which is what we are as principled individuals, are there negative aspects or negative policy decisions that Trump's made since he's become elected president that you would disagree with?
Yeah, absolutely. There's lots. I mean, I'm a philosophical anarchist, so he obviously isn't going to get rid of the state tomorrow. But things that I have really not liked that Trump has done is I can't stand his harsh rhetoric and Jeff Sessions' rhetoric on drugs. Now, as a libertarian, I understand that, hey, if you want to put poisonous substances into your body that results in your detriment, that's personal individual freedom. So I hate Trump when it comes to the drug stuff. But then again, you got a man who's in his 70s, who has never smoked, who has never drank. And if I do remember correctly, his father or people throughout his childhood kind of maybe abused alcohol. I think that's why he said he doesn't drink nowadays. So he's an older gentleman. It just might be like he's never done drugs, so he doesn't know, so he's hard on drugs. So I can't stand Jeff Sessions and the marijuana bull crap and attacking the drugs. Get rid of that, Trump. Who cares? Personal freedom. If you want to put drugs in your body, that's your ideal. So the drugs, can't stand the policy with Trump and that. Another thing that I don't like Trump is he's a little harsh on whistleblowers. I wish that tomorrow he'd go out, pardon Julian Assange. Think of how much that would do for his base. And it would send a message to all the people in the intelligence community that I support you if you come out and leak information that is for the American public to move us towards more personal freedom and liberty and to out all the corruption. So please, pardon Julian Assange, pardon Edward Snowden. Don't have him over in Russia, Edward Snowden. Bring him back in the States and say, no, we support intelligent people who come out and leak that our government's spying massively on our population. So I think he should be less harsh on drugs, be way more sympathetic and pardon the whistleblowers. And another thing, I feel he's a little soft. I feel that he's a little soft on the globalists. Like when he was running, he's like, if I was in office, Hillary, you'd be in jail. Now all this stuff has come out, Hillary, put her in jail, throw it in, start the process. So I think he kind of caters to them, just like when he came out with the FISA memo, he shook his fingers and said, you guys should be ashamed, you guys should be ashamed. I wish he was a little bit more hard, and I wish he was, instead of you should be ashamed, you should be, we're going to investigate, and you guys are going to go to jail if we find out you committed a coup against me. So I wish he was a little bit more harder on that. What's another thing here? Yeah, I think that's a bit basic. Oh yeah, and then last thing I think I critique about Trump is foreign policy. I'm kind of more of like a Rand Paul and stuff like that. If people want to destroy their countries in the Middle East and do that, let them do it. Stay out of it. Let's set an example in America, and through our prosperity and our freedom and way of living, convince them that way, rather than going in their countries, sending soldiers in there and try to actually bring in democracy that way, because it shows it doesn't always work, and it actually ends up getting a lot of our own families members killed over in the Middle East. So I wish he would kind of stay and not involved in the Middle East, have a strong border, have strong national security. If anyone attacks us, yeah, bomb the hell out of them. But let's not go searching for wars in the Middle East. Forget the drug thing, decriminalize all of them, pardon the whistleblowers, and be a little bit more harsh on the globalists the way you ran when you run for office. Now that you're in office, let's see you take that more hard stance, because that's what got you elected. Saying things like, if I was in office, Hillary would be in jail. We want to see that hard Trump again. So those would be my critiques of Trump's policies. How about you?
Yeah, I actually, when you brought up the Jeff Sessions thing, it's like, I'm surprised at this stage, but like you say, put yourself in Trump's mindset as someone that's never done drugs, and he's probably not a fan of drugs by any stretch of the imagination. But yeah, it drives me nuts to think, really though, I mean, I forget how many states now, but many states have been working hard to unwind. I mean, the drug war. Holy shit. I mean, it has incarcerated and caused so much, well, death and devastation and hardships for so many people and so many families. It's and it's all victimless. It's all based on victimless crimes, folks. Like, these aren't people that are trying to impose anything on anybody. It's always a voluntary exchange. You might not like it. People like Jeff Sessions or even Trump, you might not like it. But listen, that's what having a live let live mentality is there's lots of things I don't agree with, but hey, as long as you're not hurting anyone and it's a voluntary exchange, hey, even if somebody gets harmed as a voluntary exchange, as long as everybody went into that exchange, knowing what they're doing, well, natural selection is just going to play out no matter whether we like it or not. If you choose to do something, like perfect example, this fentanyl shit. I am completely against these kind of ridiculous drugs that just a small, tiny bit. But hey, knowing that, if you have an educated population, which to me that's the most important thing, but if you have people that are still willing to take that kind of risk, well, listen, like I say, of course I'm compassionate, I care, but if you're foolish enough to take that risk, then you ultimately, now to get real freedom means that I'm going to give you the freedom that you can take that risk. That's your choice to make. But you also have to suffer the consequence of that. You don't get to impose, if you get yourself, in a situation where you're almost on deathbed, well, you better make sure you've also, bought some health care coverage, or you've done something to make sure that you've hedged against the fact that you're taking these kind of risks. You're playing Russian roulette. But then to try to impose your hardships on other people by forcing them to have to take care of you, and that's another thing too. What happens if you help these people and then they go do the same thing? Like I say, incentivize people properly. And with this Jeff Sessions coming down hard against, like I said, this is something that has taken decades, folks. I mean, it's been a slow, gradual progress to get people away from this, oh, drugs are bad, oh, we got to fucking incarcerate and criminalize everyone that does drugs, to the point where you have now majorities of the population that actually agree with libertarians that, yeah, we got to have this with a more live, let live approach and let market fundamentals dictate this stuff. Let people, as we've seen, look at places like Portugal. You legalize drugs. Well, think about if you had a teenage, especially, a son or whatever. We all know that people have that little bit of rebellious mindset. It's all in the back of our psychology. It goes all the way back through our evolutionary process. But you tell people they can't do something, you're actually telling them maybe you should, because if you want to be rebellious against your parents or against the state. Whereas in Portugal, it's proof now. I mean, there's proof. Drug use has actually gone down in places where it's become legalized. And why? Because there's not a stigma involved no more. There's no longer this pretense that, oh, I've got to do that just as a rebellious act. Not to suggest that people that like to do drugs are going to do drugs regardless. But legality, that has never changed. I mean, think about it. You can go to the most high security maximum prison in the U.S. and still find drugs. So people will get their drugs if they want their drugs. So legislation is not actually going to change that. Giving people freedoms and letting market fundamentals, letting education. Look at smoking. Smoking doesn't have to be, it didn't really actually get reduced necessarily by government mandates or edicts. Just people are a little bit better educated and informed about this, and it's no longer considered something popular. Once again, when I was growing up, smoking was predominantly, I'm talking about just cigarettes here, it was like a thing to show you rebellious nature, right? No longer that now, because it has a completely different stigma attached to it. In other words, you're completely uncool, right? It's uncool. It's not even a rebellious thing to smoke cigarettes anymore. So you've seen cigarette use decline. Well, like I say, that's the way you deal with things. So 100% agree with Matt. The drug war bullshit, and Jeff Sessions trying to unwind all the hard work and effort put in by many people in many states to try to, help the people that have suffered. And I mean, that's another thing too, the Democrats and stuff. Hello, and we all know the numbers will speak volumes. Like, it's a lot of these people that you claim you need to protect, the maybe people in the black community or the Mexicans or whatever, or Latinos, you can help them by not trying to be the authoritarian mommy or daddy, by just giving them a little freedom, educating them properly, and that ultimately, there's still people who will make bad decisions, but if you care about these people properly, giving them freedom is a much better approach than trying to smother them to death.
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess that's about all the things I disagree. He obviously is doing a lot of good things. I mean, the tax cuts we already talked about, very good. I agree with all of them. Obviously, taxation, philosophically, we understand how that works, but any kind of cuts is obviously a step towards better. The regulation cuts was huge. So I think he cut them by like 70, 80%, and he brought in a new law that states that every new regulation brought on the boards, you have to cut two. So that's just going to, if that stays, that's going to continually shrink regulation, not get more. So that's really good. I love how he blasts the mainstream media. Mainstream media always had such a power hold over the influence of politicians running for office and stuff like that, and influencing the population. And now there's a heavy, heavy distrust in all media. And actually, I'm okay with that. I do believe you should even distrust alternative media. Do your own research. So as long as there's a heavy distrust in media across the board, they're calling everyone fake news, that's fine, because that means people got to actually go and figure out if it is fake news, and that requires people being woken up to the truth. So the distrust in the media that Trump has done, the damage he's done since he's been in office, huge. I mean, think about it. CNN's now blasted. I mean, they're a joke, which is great. I also love how he's more like a counter towards social justice warrior. So he'll say some stupid things, but he won't come out and really apologize for it. He'll be like, well, that's how it is. So he's kind of smashing through the narrative of social justice, which is moving us in the right direction. And the major thing that I love about Trump and why I got on the Trump bandwagon, the immigration. He's doing a lot of good things there. He's trying to pass these, the what do you call it, the Dream Act, that stuff, and the people who can bring who come over here and can bring in a bunch of other chain migration, bringing a bunch of their other family members in and stuff like that, and cousins of cousins and cousins. So the immigration is probably the best thing that Trump is doing, and if he can get that stuff passed throughout the government, that's going to be probably his biggest accomplishment since he's been in office.
Right on. I can't disagree with you on any of those points and any of those aspects. I'm completely on board there. Maybe we should head towards now to dealing with another thing that just happened recently is the State of the Union address. I found the hilarious part of it was just the sheer fact that all these Democrats that supposedly care so much, that's the whole pretense, right? That they care so much about some of these minority groups or special interest groups or whatever, and they care about their rights and freedoms. And here was Trump, pointing out real facts that, the black unemployment rate down, Latino unemployment rate down. He's willing to, like he literally suggested that, what was it? It started out as 800,000, but I think it's expanded up to, it's like 1.8, like a huge amount of these dreamers, and like I say, we're all reasonable people, right? They were brought to this country by their parents. They had no choice themselves. They didn't know anything about what was going on, right? And they're now in the country. They probably, some of them are gainfully employed, productive members of society. So yeah, of course you're not just going to throw them to the curb. But Trump, being the negotiator he is, I mean, the guy, hello, art of the deal, folks. Art of the deal. It's okay. I'm going to work with you Democrats on this. But see, that's the thing. Once he built it up, threw the ball in their corner, and what'd they do with it? Yeah, they showed their true colors there. It's like, no, actually, what? You don't care about these dreamers? That was the whole pretense. That's what you constantly try to talk up, that, it's all about protecting the dreamers. Well, Trump basically said, okay, well, we'll protect them now. We get it. I'm not going to put any more hardships on these people than need be. But we're not going to keep an open border, so you constantly have a mass influx of illegals coming in here, which is, like I say, like Matt said, continually soaking up not just the resources, but changing the political landscape, changing the very culture of that country. And think about what it also does for the people that go to the U.S. legally. Think about if you're a person that's been on a list for 2 years, waiting to get in there. You've done all the things. You've crossed your T's. You've dotted your I's. You've done all the necessary paperwork, and you're waiting to get into that country. And yet, someone could just plop across the border, whether it's not just Mexican, they're coming from all areas of South America, or they're coming from, like I say, some of these third world emerging countries in the Middle East and Africa, going through and using those gateways to get in there. And they're actually, if you care about the legal immigrants, if you really care about immigration, well, stop letting the ones that are doing it illegally take precedent and allowing them to basically assume and accumulate the resources that the legal immigrants, the ones that genuinely would be contributors to society, to the American society, give them their due, right? The domestic population comes first. Legal immigrants should be, a secondary afterthought. But once you become a legalized citizen in the U.S., then you get all the rights and freedoms that, a naturalized citizen. But the illegals are getting even more. This is the crazy thing. They have entire cities where, the mayors, the bureaucracy, the deep state, they're protecting illegals. Which, think about it. If you're Mexican or black or white, I don't care what color you are, to tell you the truth. But if you're one of those people that they say, oh, we need people to, pick the apples or the oranges or do these jobs that apparently Americans won't do, okay, or naturalized citizens won't do, okay, well, now you're forcing the people that have done things legally and have to pay taxes. Well, now you're forcing even those people that are on the lowest rung of the ladder. Now they have to compete with illegals that don't pay taxes, that have never, contributed to anything in society. So you're actually hurting the people that you pretend that you want to help by allowing this mass influx of illegal immigrants. And the beautiful thing about the wall, listen, we all wish we didn't have to have wall, but you know what? It's not just the fact that you have a wall, it's the message that you are sending. It's like, no, we gave you the opportunity, you took advantage of it, and now we're saying, nope, we're pushing back. It's not just the wall, but that wall sends a big message. It's saying the buck is stopping here.
Yeah, so as we were saying in the State of the Union, basically all that Trump did in his speech was talk about pro-America, pro how good it's doing, the stock market's up, taxes are down, businesses are flying in, jobs are up, basically all the things that we love in America, and God and country, and be proud of who you are, and, we're doing prosperous. So basically the Democrats just stood down and protested that, they hate God, they hate country, they hate prosperity, so they just shot themselves in the foot. I can understand not standing and clapping for certain things that they disagree on, but just not standing for anything and looking so miserable. It really sent a message to the American people that these people are literally fundamentally against what America is fundamentally funded and for, God and country, low taxes, personal freedom. So they definitely drew the line in the sand, and it was very, very interesting to see.
Well, what I seen with the camera pan out there this is a perfect example of politics over principle, folks. Because if they were truly principled, right? And even myself, like I said, I have principles that I uphold, but I will be pragmatic. If someone, even someone that I can't stand, right, is saying something or doing something that I actually pretend to uphold as a positive thing, then I will put and set aside my feelings towards that person and recognize that, hey, yeah, I can get on board with that. But the Democrats, they clearly showed, no, it's all about, they want the power. All they're wanting to seek is power. The principles, like I say, they showed they lack principles. And I think that's actually, I think the visuals of that alone, that's gonna resonate for a lot of American people, and for all the Democrats or these progressive, these collectivists that think that 2018 that's going to be the unwinding of the Trump administration, or what he stands for and what the people are going to support. I think the American people, I hope I'm proven correct in this assumption that actually it's going to go the other way. I think that the Republicans, well, hopefully, here's the thing, and if you want to listen to my advice, do or don't, whatever, right? But get rid of it. Yeah, Jeff Sessions, get rid of that piece of shit. Get rid of some of these fucking neocons that aren't actually, truly on board. Now, I can admit, yeah, there might be some positive aspects, and if there isn't someone running against, if a Democrat may be, like I say, be wise, Americans, be wise. We got to be pragmatic, but at least be as principled as humanly possible. If you got to get rid of one neocon and replace them with someone that's more aligned with Trump's policies and more aligned with freedom, get rid of the Republicans. But at the end of the day, don't shoot yourself in the foot and give the Democrats any means or method to be able to unwind. I mean, this is the chance. To me, this is like basically the last chance the American people have, as far as if you want to do things through the political process. You have enough people now that you can affect change. But if it doesn't work this time, and you do get Democrats in power, or they maybe even just get the Senate, if they can tie things up to the point where nothing gets done, They might be looked at the saviors maybe in 2020 if they can put forth and present enough politics. And like I say, they got a lot of people in the deep state, right? So you've got your chance, America. You've got your chance. You've got all three levels of government down there, at least enough of them that are willing to carry out Trump's policy decisions. Do not do anything that will negate that from playing out. Because if you do, well, like I say, who knows if you'll ever get that chance again. So be principled in your approach, be pragmatic, but ultimately make sure that you're heading down that right path. You know, make sure that you're goal oriented to the, you know, be as pragmatic as you can be, you know, to make sure that you're supporting the right candidates that are going to keep the American people in the right psychology and doing things the way that needs to happen. Let's make America great again.
Yeah, and one thing I'd also point out that a lot of people have kind of skipped over is when Obama was in office, almost every mass shooting that ever happened, there was always the push for the gun narrative. And since Trump has been in office, there's hardly any more gun debate or gun talk anymore. And right now, we're using the First Amendment right to speak and to debate these ideas, but we know it's the Second Amendment that is the teeth to that First Amendment. And I'm just so proud that since Trump has been in office, because he is so pro-gun, that when a mass shooting happens, there's not even hardly a whisper. Now it's all talk about Russia. They've had to change their narrative and try different ways to manipulate and scheme. And there's just no blatant talk about passing laws to restrict our freedom of speech or gun laws at all. It's not even a discussion anymore. And I think it's kind of skipped over that when in office with Obama, almost every other week there was a shooting and constantly the push for gun narrative. And I'd also like someone to point this out or maybe go and do the research for me. I know Trump hasn't been in there that long, but let's take the year that Trump has been in office. Let's calculate how many mass shootings have happened. And let's take Obama's 1 year from that and calculate how many mass shootings have happened. I would suspect there was more mass shootings under Obama than there was under Trump because they used them in the media to push their agenda, where now they can't. So they're not going to publicize the mass shooting as much and try to push gun agenda because it ain't going to go nowhere. So there's a lot of things that are happening behind scenes that we don't know. And that's another thing I'd like to point out is you're not Trump. You don't know. You're not in his brain. You're not getting the briefings of all the the classified information, the ultra secret stuff. So as much as we know what's corrupt and what's going on, there's so much more that we have no idea that's going on behind closed doors. It's literally like an iceberg, and we just see the tip of it. But there's 90% that Trump is dealing with behind closed doors, and props to the guy. I mean, he literally sleeps 4 or 5 hours a night. He is dedicated. He has put his life on the line for this country. A lot of other people say it too, like Trump did it, for power or whatnot. He could have retired on a beach. Before the election started, the media loved the guy. They ate him up. There was no talk about Trump being racist or a bigot or anything. He could go on any news station there was, and they'd praise him. So he literally gave all that up, gave up retiring on a beach somewhere, gave up dealing with the bullcrap of being drugged through the media for what? Right now, he's in it to win it. Because if he was all about himself, why wouldn't he just retire on a beach like most other people would have done?
It's Canadian Libertarian, and I love liberty.